Well, Atzlahel, everyone, good day. Willard Bill Jr. Tietze, Buckelstabschat. My name is Willard Bill Jr., and I serve as the tribal liaison for Seattle Colleges. And we thank you, especially those of you that are here in person, and all of you that are joining online, and those that will stream us later in your classroom. So we're so excited today. Our special guest, Willie Frank III here from the Nisqually Tribe, is going to be here. He had a huge influence on the film that we're watching, and also, so we want to encourage you when the film's over to stick around if you have Q&A, and also you can put questions in the chat, and we do have people monitoring for that. I was really passionate about bringing this to Seattle colleges, as many people are just unfamiliar with our civil rights struggle in the Pacific Northwest, and the fish wars and what happened. And Willie's father was a figurehead during that time period, and really a motivating force. And really people see the graphic images of when our people were getting beat or getting shot at and so forth, but I would say the work afterwards maybe even critically more important after the Bolt decision as a collaborator. And one of those people that really brought us together as Native communities. And I know as an educator, I can think of 20 years ago when I was a principal, and we'd go to Frank's Landing, and Billy would come there personally, every time, and talk to the kids personally. And remember how he would, talk to them about what it took to get here and to continue that mission. But also as an elder and a leader in our community, he would express that he loved them, right? And so hearing that, and so for many of our kids, the first time with that. And so as we continue this work, and Willie and I and others, this legacy work that we're very passionate about here. So just super excited about today. But I'm gonna stop talking because I get on my soapbox here. And we really want you to spend the time and enjoy the film. And then, but yeah, please, if there's questions and so forth, we know sometimes people don't want to go online or say it verbally, please put it in the chat and shoot it in there, and we'll make sure or take notes, and we'll make sure and address those as best we can at the end. So, awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Also, just housekeeping for
Spirit
Central. If you haven't signed in, please feel free to sign in. We've got snacks and food as well.
Fishing is our way of life. We are salmon people. Deeply and clearly we think that fishing is who we are.
For generations, the salmon has sustained our way of life.
Fishing, it's a time to teach, it's a time to learn, it's a time to become connected with your roots and who you are.
It's been stated that salmon are as important as the air that we breathe. And we've always been taught, when the tide is out, the table is set.
But without the Bolt decision, there'd be no fish today.
It changed everything. Probably the most important decision in our state's history in a lot of ways.
Without the Bolt decision, we might not be Indian anymore. There's one, all right. Still a fish. Yes, sir. That is a beautiful fish, man.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Here, hold up, Ben. I need to get a picture of that.
Nice one.
That's a beautiful one. Yes, sir. Fishing is the way of life for me here on the Nisqually River. I've had the opportunity to fish for over 20 years in the same fishing set where my father, Billie Frank Jr., and my grandfather, Willie Frank Sr., fished. For us, the Sundays when we're open on the river is going to church. That's our way of going to church and connecting with our spirituality. And it's unfortunate now because we're down to 12 days of fishing a year. My father, 60 years ago, was still getting his head bashed in on the riverbanks. He was getting his head bashed in Olympia, right on the rocks where our state capitol is, during a fishing protest to demonstrate what goes on along the river because the state of Washington, they didn't want to tell people the truth. And so now as we come in 49 years later, we come up to Bolt 50, you know, it is time to tell the truth. The Medicine Creek Treaty Tree was just right over here. That treaty is the foundation of who we are. Everything that was, you know, supposedly signed there, you know, is what was promised to us, you know, but it was also what was taken away from us too.
I believe 1855 was when the Denny Party landed, and that's when some serious changes began. As the Europeans and the settlers began to stake claims, things began to change for the native people.
The colonial people came along and they believed that they can just come and take over the territories where we were already here.
The United States had to enter into these treaties because every square inch of land in Washington state was owned by tribes.
There was a huge language barrier. Northern Lushootseed and Southern Lushootseed were the primary dialects spoken by the treaty tribes of Point Elliott and Medicine Creek. The only way to convey messages or to have a discussion was a trade language called Chinook jargon. Let's just say it's not very accurate. It doesn't translate well into all languages. It can mean many different things. The same word in Chinook jargon can mean several different definitions. But it's also, you know, based on context. I'm sure that was one of the objectives by the federal government, to manipulate the tribal people and make them believe that, you know, this is their only option. This is what you can do. This is what we're going to give you.
Territory was ceded and we were placed on little reservations. We got little reservations, but we also secured some rights.
Our leaders at that time were savvy enough to recognize what was happening and had the foresight to make arrangements in certain wording and certain phrases. It's like usual and accustomed fishing stations, the right to fish and gather at their usual and accustomed areas. And it became an advantage to the first people of this area.
We reserved our hunting rights and our fishing rights and our gathering of berries and our health and education.
Tribes signed the treaties with the understanding of this arrangement is in perpetuity. We signed the treaty to retain our identity, not to become white. And that's lost in the laundry often.
See, we're not a conquered people. There's no rights of conquest here. We entered into a peace treaty without going to war, and we sacrificed this land. We ceded this territory for just a little bit of rights.
They really wanted to ensure that we would always be able to fish in perpetuity with the landscape because of how inherently connected it is to us. And I think that does maintain a lot of power for our tribal communities.
We had a federal judge recognize our treaty rights back in 1974. And before Judge Bull, I mean, a lot of folks said that was the Indians' last stand here on the Nisqually and all of our different rivers.
So when that treaty was signed, the salmon weren't so important to the non-tribal people. The only way to preserve salmon at the time was to barrel and pickle them or salt them. So it wasn't until canning was invented that the salmon became a commodity.
There is nothing to keep these fish from swimming out once they are caught. Only the instinct never to turn back keeps thousands of salmon in the traps. These traps catch as many as 35,000 sleek and meaty salmon per day.
You could actually see a great decline during those early years of canning. That was the start of the major decline of our salmon.
It turned into a money grab with the salmon. In the early 1900s, once it turned, I think folks started moving up here more. You started seeing tribes getting less and less.
All of the off-reservation sites that our people traditionally used, one by one got taken away by influx of immigrants.
Fish numbers started declining as the management of them was done in a manner that was destroying the run, and the habitat was being destroyed by development and logging practices. And so as the resource declined, there was more controversy over who was going to be able to harvest that declining resource. And the state decided that they were going to stop the tribes from fishing in their usually accustomed places.
Our traditional practices became illegal under state law.
There was a lot of tension in the fishermen. They could only fish on reservation. And of course the fish are, not always on reservation. And so they started going out. They started getting caught and they started going to jail.
This boat would go back and forth 24 hours a day, making sure that they weren't crossing this invisible line that the state had mandated that the Indians couldn't fish there anymore. And I think that was literally the beginning of the fish wars for a lot of people.
If they wanted to fish, they had to fish the same as non-treaty. But most often than not, all the tribes didn't agree with that and didn't do that. Enforcement came after them when they were not on reservation or fishing with the non-treaty.
And every time they would put a net in the water, here comes state game, state fisheries. They'd all come out with all of their war gear, and they pounded the bottoms out of the canoes. That's what happened to all the canoes.
It was quite a contentious time. There was a lot of racism and a lot of defending yourselves downtown.
If somebody had a little outboard motor, the pigs would drop it in salt water, slash the nets, arrest the fishermen, treat them like they were thieves, like they were the thieves. And here, everything had been stolen from the Indians.
My mom would come and say, well, your dad won't be coming home tonight. Him and your uncles. Shit. Just to let us know that he'll probably get arrested for fishing.
They had to secretly fish, kind of just be incognito so they weren't getting arrested because they were breaking the rules.
They were brutal. I can remember here the fisheries director throwing rocks at tribal members up here. How can that happen? How can that happen?
Many of their fisheries were preempted by the non-Indians taking away their fish before they got to the reservation.
They called it conservation. That's how they characterized their restrictions on tribal fisheries. You can't fish in the Nisqually River because of conservation. But what it really was that they'd rather catch those fish out on the ocean or somewhere else out in Puget Sound, so there aren't fish returning to the Nisqually River.
In those days, economic conditions weren't very good. The people lived paycheck to paycheck.
We was poor. We was dirt poor. I'm not joking. There was hole. We had no running water.
They were desperate. That was the circumstance. They had no health care. They had no education. They had no money. They had no housing. There was no place to live.
And all of a sudden you're getting inundated by state rules and state laws that says Indians can't fish here, Indians can't do that, telling the Indians they can't be who they are.
You think about what the state of Washington tried to do to our people it was the same thing that was done 100 years before that with termination, trying to just get rid of us. You know, they were trying to throw all of our people in jail, nets, motors, everything, confiscate it all, and set these bails at this outrageous bail. I mean, that's why you still have that anger. You still have a lot of that bitterness today, you know, and you have a lot of these elders who are still remember that.
Billie Frank Jr. liked to say, I wasn't a policy guy, I was a getting arrested guy. And that's true. Billie was arrested more than 50 times in his fight to protect tribal fishing rights.
You know, Billy, every time he got arrested and hauled off to jail in Tacoma, every time he was released, he'd come right back and jump in the boat and go fishing again. And they'd come back and get him again, and again, and again, and again, and again. He wasn't going to give up.
This is the Nisqually Indian Reservation, created under the provisions of the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. This is the place still known today as Frank's Landing. Bill Frank lives here.
My grandfather, Willie Frank Sr., in 1919, he purchased 6 acres of land right here at Frank's Landing along the Nisqually River.
The movement was us going to jail, you know, right here at the landing here. Fort Lewis is over there. The state game department was watching us 24 hours a day here. And we continued to fish. We fished every day.
Grandpa's house was right on the river. Masel's house was over here. And then we lived in just a shack that had no insulation or nothing. It just had wood walls. And we had oiled heat. That was our community at the time before the judge boat decision.
We were always fishing here. You know, this was our usual and accustomed ground in our eyes, but the state didn't see it that way. Technically, as we are off the Nisqually Reservation.
A lot of game wardens coming in arresting whoever they were after. It would be either my 2 uncles that lived there or Dad, but they'd come in with 30 cars, you know. All my uncles and Dad were in jail at the same time. And that's when Auntie Maisel and Mom had to go set nets because we weren't going to give up.
Uncle Don, my dad's brother, his daughter Nancy tells the story about how she was the only kid that went to go see my dad, her dad, you know, and all of these fishermen in jail. And she said that her dad, Uncle Don, was so upset that she came because they were getting 3 meals a day. They get thrown in jail and their family's at home starving and they're getting 3 meals a day.
They ended up arresting Mom and my auntie.
This net is illegal gear and it's going to be taken.
You might take us with it, but we're not letting you go fishing under Medicine Creek Treaty, and we're both all members. We are too.
Poaching is what you're doing.
We're not either. You're the one that's poaching. You're the ones that's been poaching on our land. We're not taking this net. This is the last net you got.
Both under arrest for fishing in cold water.
to your home by yourself then?
No, I had my auntie's daughters. They were there. I stayed with them. They were in their 20s. So, no, we had cousins and stuff.
1963, 1964, that was when the raids and the fish-ins really kind of started. They wanted to have a demonstration down here to show folks what was happening. And then they went down to Olympia. The game wardens they were coming down here at night so nobody could see what was happening. Well, the fish-ins and the demonstrations, those were to show everybody, the state of Washington, the public, whoever wanted to come out and see and witness this and open their eyes to what was going on.
The object was us getting in front of the feds to reaffirm our treaty that we had the right to be out there.
We're all arrested. They have your arms behind you, and then they pick you up by your wrists, and it just tears your shoulders right out of the socket. Even those of us that didn't get smacked with clubs, which of course I did. It was painful and inconvenient and really scary because I was looking at 35 years in prison. But I was very surprised that I wasn't killed, so 35 years, I might be able to live 35 years.
There was a lot of thought behind how we take this from these instances that weren't very well covered to having them become well covered.
On the Puyallup River, there was a camp, tribal fishermen. It was a staging point for demonstrations, and they would send people out fishing, and they would get bashed and hauled away. And it was all a way to get press coverage and the like.
I wanted the press to be able to get there. I wanted ACLU and people from the universities to be able to get there. That's why I wanted a camp.
And of course, in the 60s, you had the civil rights movement going on. Billy and his cohorts recognized that they could use that to their benefit. He went and talked to Martin Luther King, for example, to get some advice on how to address this civil rights issue. That's what it was.
We had a real direct connection to LA and Hollywood. You go from Marlon Brando, Dick Gregory, and it became more public, right? They weren't clubbing Marlon Brando over the head.
That just brought more press, and the more press they could bring to the issue, there was a lot of support for civil rights. And they cashed in on that, if you will.
The morning that camp was busted, people from ACLU swam across the Puyallup River to get to the camp so they could witness. A Vista lawyer drove from Seattle, and he came right up, and he was standing right up on the railroad tracks when the National Rifle Association was taking pot shots at us from across the river. There was a barrel of a gun like this. The pig pulled the trigger. Well, I thought I was being shot, but it was a gas canister. Shot a damn gas canister. I said, "Tear gas don't bother us Indians." I kicked it back at them and started trying to pull one of the gas masks off the guy's face that had shot it at me. And that started a game of kick the canister. All these Indians were jumping on the Tacoma police, pulling their masks off, and the police were like,
But the turning point was the state one day decided to come down on that encampment.
We burned one of their bridges. Well, it's creosote treated, so when it burned, it threw up a huge black plume of smoke. And I said, that's just our smoke signal for help.
All those different branches of enforcement started firing tear gas.
Well, the U.S. attorney happened to be there that day talking to the tribes, and he got tear gassed.
So he went to Portland and he recommended to his superiors, we take this case on United States versus Washington. That was the real turning point in the United States on behalf of the tribes to go to the courts.
Back then in the 70s, we didn't think of ourselves as nation building. We were just fighting for a cultural, traditional way of life that we felt was ingrained in the treaties itself.
So we weren't asking for a specific allotment or any land or anything else. All we wanted to do was be able to exercise our treaty rights, to be able to fish and hunt in our usual and accustomed grounds.
So when the U.S. attorney out of the solicitor's office in Portland, George Dysart, said he wanted to bring a case to affirm the treaty fishing rights of all the tribes in Puget Sound, I said, sign me on, sign our firm on. Away we went, getting experts and witnesses and facts and figures and exhibits and who knows what all.
So the United States brought the decision, and then tribes intervened. We had the Ho, Makah, Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Puyallup, Quinault, and Skokomish were the original interveners. Then you had the Quileute, Soxswaddle, Squaxin, Stillaguamish, Upper Skagit, the Lummi, and Yakima came in. Of those, 8 were represented by legal services. And that shows the lack of resources those tribes had. And I think it shows the courage they had to go forward.
And so we went to a meeting of all the attorneys for all of the other tribes. And they were saying, well, if we get 5%, that'll be good, because they're only 1% of the population. And these were all white people representing tribes. And none of the tribal people even went to the meeting. I told them, you have nothing to compromise. You have nothing. None of this belongs to us. It belongs to our future generations. And they're going to read what we say here.
Quinault joined, along with a dozen other Western Washington tribes. But their DC attorneys convinced them that they should get out. Told them, look, it's a weak case to get out of it. You're gonna suffer if you stay in this litigation. Things at the time were so desperate. The fishery was regarded as a huge part of the economy of this region, and had been for some time. And the Puyallup tribe's butt has been kicked 3 times real hard by the United States Supreme Court, and they filed a petition to withdraw. And here was this white guy from Montana, Judge Bolt.
Who were scared to death. He was appointed by Nixon, and we thought, here comes a right winger. We're in big trouble. We're in big trouble.
He was not very sympathetic to those who broke the law. A lot of our clients were deeply into breaking the law. They were notable for breaking the law. A guy like Billie Frank, that's what they were doing. And he'd put away some union leaders that he had sentenced. So it was scary for us.
Now, looking back on it, you can see that Judge Bolt maintained a huge interest in what he was hearing from the tribes. And he chastised the state attorneys a lot, so that should have been a key right there, too. With the tribes, there was the main U.S. attorney, that was Stu Pearson. Then there was an interior solicitor, Dysart was his name. He was a key participant. And then there were quite a few tribal attorneys that represented individual tribes or groups of tribes. And so, yeah, they were all a team. So impressed with the quality of the U.S. attorney and the tribal attorneys. Top notch, really smart people. In the evenings, we would go back to a hotel and we would work till midnight, hashing out the testimony that had happened that day and the plans for the next day, and the intelligence of that group of attorneys who didn't know anything about fish. And they were able to absorb what we would tell them and turn that back in the next day to cross-examination and very intelligent questions back to those same people on the stand. And that impressed me.
Well, the Attorney General's office exhibited its worst tendencies, thinking up every legal angle they could to disavow the treaty. And Slade Gordon, not to his credit, he was leading it. They came up that treaties are not self-executing. That means they're of no effect unless there's legislation after the treaty to implement them. What does that mean? I didn't get that. That's a gobbledygook, and the courts basically said so. The treaties made under the Constitution are the supreme law of the land. End of story.
The state made several mistakes. One was, as their main fisheries science guy, they picked a well-known, very reputable professor from the University of Washington, which was a good idea, except that the professor and his sons ran a fishing boat, commercial fishing boat, obvious conflict of interest. And Pearson, I can see him now. He was salivating. Wait till I get that guy on the witness stand. And he did. He just tore him to pieces.
The state's management was like a good old boys club, especially the game department. They had the sport fishing community in their pocket, and the tribes were the enemy. And I don't know that it was racism.
Their position was racist.
Yeah, it might have been racism to some extent.
It was, these people are not our people.
It was more one of control, wanting control.
We are the people who can do this, who can run this fishery. And we've been doing it since we got here and took it away from these people.
They were trying to make it look like the tribes weren't capable, that they were harvesting fish that were needed for conservation.
They testified in one way or another that, first of all, the other tribes were incompetent, and so the state had to be involved here.
The state was lying through their teeth. So every time you caught a fish, you marked your catch record card. And then they would collect the sampling of those catch record cards and project an estimate of the total catch. Well, the state would have none of that. It says, we don't estimate, we count. What was that kind of bullshit? I mean, I said, no, you're not counting, you're estimating. You're not counting every single fish. You're counting a sample of the fish, and then you are projecting a total. That's an estimate. It was that kind of stuff that was going on. So from my perspective, I was literally trying to ferret out what was true and what was not true, and making sure the attorneys knew that.
The key part of U.S. v. Washington, the litigation before Judge Bolt, was that Quinault got back into the case, but they got back in late. So we came last. The whole trial had gone, and then the Quinaults came. That turned out to be a huge advantage because Quinault was heavy into fisheries. Not only were they regulating fisheries, they had a federal hatchery on the reservation, they had a tribal hatchery, and they had a fisheries enforcement regime on the reservations. And they held those up as the paradigm for the Quinault Reservation. At the end of the case, in came the Quinaults, and they brought in their PhD fisheries biologists. We even had, we decided Judge Bolt needed to see an Indian in uniform. So we brought Clifford Buddy Mowich in his patrol uniform. He would come up to the bar and ask permission to give me something. Now, what he was giving me was an empty file, but he was showing Judge Bolt an Indian in uniform. It was a big deal, and it did impress Judge Bolt. What happened was the state failed to prove that the Quinaults weren't handling their responsibilities as a fisheries manager appropriately. And the Quinaults proved that they were.
Judge Bolt delivered opinion on Lincoln's birthday on February of '74. Of course, we start reading it.
I became lightheaded reading it. I had to go and sit down, and I was shaking. Couldn't really explain it, except I said we'd won, and we won everything.
Judge Bolt ruled that the treaty rights were the supreme law of the land and trumped state law. This is monumental. This is a game changer. The tribes were governments and had a right to organize their governments and take over their fishery and manage it.
We won. We won the case.
He ruled that there was an allocation, a 50-50 allocation. They got the authority to manage their own fisheries. But the big win, I think, was for the tribes as governments and the recognition of their treaty right.
I don't think us in the Northwest can give the Bolt decision enough credit for elevating our governmental standing. The recognition that these treaties were contracts between sovereign nations.
To me, that's when our culture started to come alive, started to come back.
The Bolt decision has really introduced new ways for tribes to exercise sovereignty and self-governance.
And began the journey for nation building.
The tribal government in the early 70s was barely as important as the Elks Club in Paulsbo, and most tribes were poor. I think the first thoughts when the decision came down in 1974 was, what the heck is this, and how are we ever going to do anything? Because we didn't have any money.
The tribal leaders of the day created immediately the Northwest Indian Fish Commission.
I was one of the first employees, and our job was to go around helping tribes to understand what their responsibilities were under the decision.
You have to write the ordinances. You have to make the penalties. You have to create your enforcement. You have to be the court.
We learn, and I learn, it's complicated.
As far as Judge Bolt's concerned, I think he should, when he was born, the stork should have stayed at his house and he should have flew away.
Well, we didn't believe our government would let something like this happen to just normal working people.
I'm going to continue fishing, period.
The state essentially refused to acknowledge the decision.
The state consistently belittled the tribes, didn't think we could manage anything, even if the decision stood in some form which they didn't think was going to happen.
Most of us feel that we should not abide meekly by the boat decision. By so doing, we legitimize something that we think is wrong. Therefore, we feel it almost a duty not to go by the boat decision as though it is sacred.
And shortly after the decision was rendered, they were standing out there burning Judge Bolt in effigy. They had him hanging.
And right out here in Commencement Bay, they had their own fish-ins. They defied the judge's order, and they actively fished out here.
They turned the whole idea of civil disobedience around.
Civil rights, yeah. Well, I mean, we just actually lost and we don't have any more rights, period. I mean, we don't have any civil rights left.
I've always been very proud of my husband's work, and all of a sudden we're the bad guys. We're taking something away from the poor Indian who's never had anything.
Well, there's more area to fish. It just gives us more area, the boat decision has. That's how it has affected my tribe, I feel. And for the first time, I've been able to up my standard of living.
So, one of the first things that the Northwest Indian Fish Commission did, they staffed up with biologists to assist tribes in putting those units in place. The enforcement piece, the original staffing, we did have one staffer that went from tribe to tribe and helped them build their enforcement capacity.
So we basically developed a quote-unquote a starter kit with regard to fishery management responsibilities. So we started recruiting left and right. We started looking out, to the University of Washington and some of the other universities had strong fishery programs, watching for people, advertising. We had a little bit of resource to start recruiting. We were very blessed in that we had a number of individuals who had that background and they wanted to work for the tribes.
We hired a small staff of biologists that started working directly with individual tribes to help them develop their fisheries management capabilities.
The mere fact that tribes gained the expertise, gained the experts, participated in the management and managed well, propelled them, in my judgment, to be self-regulating.
It's enabled me to go out and actually make some money at it, make a living at it, instead of just, fair weather wages.
The best numbers we could ever come up with when we started the case was that at most they were catching 2% of the fish before the case. And the year after the case, they caught 50%.
This is the Macaw Dock. Today it's probably about a little over 400 tribal members participate in our fisheries. It is the largest employer. In terms of what it generates in the economy is anywhere from $6 to $10 million come into the community through fishing activities, and that by far exceeds any other economic engine and revenue for the tribe.
So you did see a pretty big impact in Nia Bay where there was less sport fishing, less commercial fishing, and us just getting started, basically. We were just getting our fleet starting to build back up after the Bolt decision.
We in no way intend to help implement the Bolt decision because we feel the Bolt decision is wrong inherently to begin with.
I was the president of the Washington State Commercial Passenger Fishing Vessel Owners Association, and we attempted to intervene and challenge the outcome of the Bolt decision.
You cannot make a living, no way. You can't even catch enough fish to pay your insurance on the boat and your gear, but you don't get enough time to fish.
It wasn't the tribal fisheries that I was upset with. It was the fact that I was going to be restricted in a manner that was going to inhibit my ability to continue the way of life I had chose. I can remember parades of protesters marching down the street. I can remember the harbor being blocked by trawlers tying their boats up side by side so no one could get in or out of Westport. Their livelihoods were being essentially just taken away.
The state hasn't got the authority to enforce the Bolt decision. So, I mean, until they do or until it's forced upon them by the federal government, we are going. I mean, we'll still continue to fish, and we'll have our rights.
Massive amounts of fish in those early days of the year were taken by illegal salmon fishermen. One fisherman claimed that he made $100,000 in illegal sales in 78 or 79, one of those years.
They were just finding any way they could to protest the outcome and the loss of a lot of their fishery as a result of that decision. And fear of that kind of loss brings out severe reaction.
You look out on Hood Canal, and it looked like a city out there. There's just boats as far as the eye could see, and those were illegal fishermen.
It was an ugly, ugly time. But a lot of it was part of their family tradition, and their fathers and grandfathers had been in the fishery, and it was being wiped out, taken away.
Well, the boat decision in the last 2 years, I haven't made a dime. I've lost money on my boat. And there's no way I can keep on going because I have to sell my boat back to the buyback in order to get out of business. If I don't, I'm going to be broke.
There were at one time some 650,000 licensed sport fishermen in this state, and it's now down to about 450,000. They're dropping out at the rate of about 100,000 a year, according to the game department, due to the boat decision. Our livelihood is simply going to be non-existent with the boat decision.
Slade Gorton continually told them that it would be reversed, so there's no need to pay attention to it.
He was a state attorney general. He fought the bolt decision from day one and believed that he could change it.
Well, he was certainly the villain.
Gorton basically issued the war plan, well, which was to fight everything. And he unleashed a couple of his deputies to battle every little dinky thing that happened.
We have been challenging this in the courts at every step.
Over openings of a fishery, over the definitions of gear, over how many fishermen could go out, and so on and so on and so on. It was just an endless battle.
Slade Gorton, he dragged our tribe into court over and over again and got his ass kicked every time.
The prevailing perspective was that it's not fair. How can you interpret their treaty right to mean that they get 50% of the harvestable fish?
Our constitutional rights gives all the people the rights, not a preferred group of people, special rights.
He, I think, truly believed that through his efforts as Attorney General that he could change the outcome of the bolt decision.
Do you see this as a kind of legal guerrilla warfare?
Yes, definitely.
That's your strategy, that's your intent?
Yes, we all know in our minds it's bad law.
Judge would rule something and the state would ignore it, and we'd have to go to court and tell the judge, they're ignoring what you said.
Well, I can't remember, I think it was 76 or around there, Judge Bolt was forced to take federal control over the state fisheries because the state refused to implement the decision. So he took the jurisdiction away from the state. That was huge.
He just basically said, okay, from now on, the feds are going to do it. All the federal agencies are going to take over Washington fisheries.
And he called in U.S. Marshals from all over the nation who had to go out and motor around out in Puget Sound, tell commercial fishermen they were violating an injunction of a federal court, and hand them the injunction. Hand it to them right there.
And Slade used the Supreme Court to try to stop what Judge Bolt had put in place.
And so I led out as the lead lawyer to the Supreme Court. The thing I remember, I think, most, though, was the endless discussion of what in common with meant. Because that's something Gorton had pressed hard on, that in common with meant the Indians should fish just like the white people, exactly where the white people fished, subject to the same rules the white people have from the state, and that's what in common with meant.
The big crux of the bolt decision is where the words in common.
which Bolt has decided means 50% of all the fish go to the Indians. It wouldn't make any sense at all to use 50%. If you're supposed to have 10 or 15 different tribes using one school in common, that means you'd probably have 600-700%. So I can't quite understand the reasoning.
And we put that idea down. That was not what it meant. The line of law that came from England will also fish in common with them, and that means each side gets 50%. We won. And I think I fell on the floor or something. I mean, I expected to win, I wanted to win, but to hear that you actually had, of course, was a big moment. Yeah.
You never think that after a case like that, you'd be hit so hard with the racism.
There are people who cannot stand the thought that Indians have a treaty that gives them a right to fish that the state can't touch.
Well, when we're fishing out in broad daylight, there's a bluff that's above the mouth of the Elwha. And I don't want to say what color people are, but they're non-tribal shooting at us from the bluffs. That was a big change.
That they were actually actively trying to stop you?
They were shooting at us. I don't know, none of us ever got hit, but it was a fairly common event.
It didn't make for wanting to be a fisherman very much. If you have to really worry about being shot or have rocks thrown at you or names being called at you, it's a horrible time.
There's a bridge that was very popular with throwing bales of hay wrapped with barbed wire off of the bridge to get into our nets.
I remember one time there was somebody standing up there walking across, and when you see somebody up there, it means it's a bad thing. They want to drop something on you or do something evil. That was just 5 years ago. So that fear still lives in a lot of fishermen.
I've been shot at before on the river, been peppered with bird shot in the summer. We've had our equipment vandalized before, and people throw rocks at us verbally and literally.
They'd cut our nets loose, cut our boats loose. You had to stay with your gear to protect it.
As I grew up, I experienced it myself. I'm about 12 years old. I'd be fishing with my father for coho salmon. We're beach seining in an area called Zangle Cove. Next thing you know, my father tells me, get on the boat. And I hear in the background, there's gonna be some dead Indians. This is after the Bolt decision. It was shocking to me.
The first time I heard somebody screaming at me when I was on the river, it was hard. I think the pain of our ancestors came through there.
One thing that I would like to get away from is the state constantly sending us letters and telling us to close this, and they're going to open that. They no longer have the right to do this.
The decade following the decision, it was characterized by flagrant violations of the decision by the state, constant court hearings, lawsuit after lawsuit. At the end of that decade, I think the last couple of years of that decade, annually, there was like 125 court hearings. So we were in court every week.
The atmosphere was very antagonistic. The state did not trust, I would say, tribal biologists, me, for example. They didn't trust the data that was being brought to the table, and they didn't accept the policy positions that the tribes were bringing.
We were always in court. Either they'd take us to court or we'd take them to court.
What Bill Wilkerson realized was that the state was losing them right and left. They were losing 90-some% of them.
In 1981, I was asked to go be the deputy director in a change of administration. I really didn't understand why people were fighting each other. I mean, it was the law of the land, and I started forming a view that The state probably needed to implement that law. And Bolt had always said he wanted the two parties to work these problems out.
Bill had to put his foot down in the department and say, you know, you're either with me with co-management or you can get out. You know, we need people that want to work with the tribes and not fight the tribes. That's basically what he said.
I went to Billy and I said, I think we could manage the resource better together than we are right now. And that was the true start of co-management.
Well, if we didn't have the Bolt decision, we wouldn't have, of course, the right to fish, and we wouldn't have the right to be co-managers of that fish. And co-management in Elwha is preserving, protecting what runs we have.
Co-management was a huge deal. Co-management became a coast-wide phenomenon.
I think we're all starting to get at the table, trying to work things out here. We have to work together to make it work.
The State Department had a lot of change it needed to make. I had a really tough job. There was a lot of opposition on my side. Let's just say that most of the people in the department didn't seem very much interested in relationships.
Tribes kept winning all these sub-proceedings under Bolt, so the courts basically forced them into co-management.
We didn't believe their scientists, they didn't believe ours, you know, so there was a lot of mistrust.
And I never understood why we weren't sharing data and why the court wasn't requiring us to share data with each other.
Wilkerson did not beat around the bush. People who couldn't effectively work in that new environment found new jobs.
I said, I want you to join me because the train is leaving the station. And cooperative management is going to be the way we're going to get back in to true fish management. Some didn't. They kind of fought us. There were a certain number of them that made life difficult during the first year of the pilot project. But I had a lot of support too. Had the support of the governor, had the support of Raleigh, who was the deputy chief of staff. A number of them started coming around. They could see that they were actually having discussions with tribal staff. I'm not saying it was popular, but it was working.
There was skepticism on the parts of some of the tribes that I worked with about how wedded the state was to this concept of co-management.
Billy said, we're going to have to do a lot of work with the tribes. They trusted Billy, but they didn't know me from Adam or trust me, so we started finding things that we had in common with each other. And that was kind of the first step that the new administration took to deal directly with the tribes, one-on-one, no attorneys involved.
We did get together and started co-managing and started having joint science information. And then we started regulating the fisheries the way we're supposed to.
All I can say is that would have never happened if it wasn't for Billie Frank. A huge legacy.
Billy went on to become a national voice for Indian country and a warrior for the natural world.
Of all the politicians and political leaders that I've met in my lifetime, and I've met a lot of them, Billie Frank, he was the best.
I have never known anybody like him. He commanded respect from everybody in the room. I don't care where you came from.
Things would have been a lot harder for us without someone like Billy out front.
We got a three-part management here in the state of Washington. It's a federal government, state, and the uniqueness of the Indian tribes here as co-managers of the resource. We have to have from the State Department the pressure to get our salmon home. The timber people, they've been sold out by importing these logs out of here. And that guy's trying to kill the owls for doing that. The Indian people used to find an old tree to die under. There is no more old trees anymore. We got to start planting them and planting them now. It takes 500 years to plant a tree. We have to do that. It might take us a century to get our salmon back. We have to do that. We have to keep the quality of life here in the Northwest that we enjoy.
He knew how to lead his people, and he was a patient man, he was a kind man, and he was tough as nails.
Man, I don't know how he did it. Every day he woke up and was ready to go. He always made sure that he represented not just Nisqually, but all of our 20 tribes. He represented the commission, but he was really the voice of our tribes, I feel.
He would not budge when it came to the treaty rights of the tribes. It was never negotiable. And he wanted his people involved in the day-to-day management of the fisheries. Billy made co-management happen because he was a compelling leader. He made habitat conservation happen. None of those agreements would have happened without Billie Frank.
Fighting over the last fish. Our salmon runs, steelhead runs are dying off.
All of us are talking, the federal, the state, the sportsmen, the citizenry, the tribes.
I think what's really unique about it is nobody else is sitting in a room with co-managers on basically a peer level and making these determinations for the fish. It's incredibly contentious because it's an allocation. You want to make sure you get your share, but you want to make everybody else gets their share.
So it developed a better relationship, actually, and it helped evolve this co-stewardship relationship between us and the state.
It's a rewarding experience. We have our tense moments when we try to work through difficult issues, but I think at the end of the day, we all recognize that the tribes have the same goals we do. We want to have healthy, harvestable salmon populations into the future for the state and the tribes.
They want to stop fighting, quit fighting over the last fish, and to try to help.
And at the end, you can generally shake hands and feel respected both directions and know you've done a good job.
Started out fighting in the Bolt decision, but I got to know a number of tribal members, people like Billy and Lorraine, that turned out to be really, really good friends. It changed the whole dynamic for me. I'm really happy that the Bolt decision happened.
I'm not saying the relationships between the state and tribes are perfect. I doubt that they are. But because of Billie Frank, they're better than they were.
Depending on who you talk to in the tribal world, great, we got 50% of the salmon back. But some of us say, bummer, we lost 50% of our salmon. I'm on the great, we got 50, and I'm where my tribe is, and others are certainly trying to recover the salmon, and it's a long road.
I'm kind of not calling this a celebration, because then you get kind of removed from that decision and how hard it was, what life was like, and what the new opportunity brought to us.
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah, we gave up half, but we also have that voice that is able to help make sure that they uphold those promises to us.
Did your dad ever talk about declining runs? I mean, when the idea that salmon were limited and they were declining come into play?
Those are some really hard times.
The fish population started dwindling pretty quickly, actually, through the 80s, and that became a big worry.
And I remember my dad, you could start to see the concern, and he would have conversations with the other fishers about, you know, those seasons being disasters, or, you know, they were talking about a disaster, and nobody really said where the sockeye went. You know, they just said there's not a sockeye season this year. And it started in the early 80s.
In 1974, the tribes were harvesting approximately 2% of the run, not 50%, about 2%. They were catching more fish at 2% in 74 than they're catching today at 50%.
finding our value now. Without the salmon necessarily, it's hard. It has created a huge disconnect, right, from our elders to our youth. Those traditions have kind of stopped being passed down. There's a lot that our youth aren't able to see or learn or practice, and there's a lot that our elders can't teach.
The declining of the salmon created in our community kind of a subtle or quiet desperation. I don't think that our community has ever really recovered from that.
There was a lot of competing interest in the resources that affect salmon. Development became more important. Timber harvest, farming.
We've also seen so many other factors hitting us, like climate change and habitat destruction and urban growth and development.
To the point where we get worried that 50% of nothing's going to be nothing if we don't manage to turn the wheels back and get habitat back in place.
We need the habitat to sustain the fish, because the promise were, the exact words from Isaac Stevens, he said, you would always have fish for your frying pans.
Some tribal person came up with the idea that if all the fish go away, our treaty isn't worth spit. So in U.S. versus Washington, they brought phase 2, in an effort to try to assert the fact that treaty had a component of habitat protection. And it was litigated in front of a Judge Orick from California.
They could see that our fishery stocks were declining, and it's kind of a no-brainer that habitat is a big part of that. They can't just promise fish when we don't have any fish. We've got to make sure that those conditions that support our fish are just as much as that treaty right as the actual fish themselves.
And Judge Orick said, yes, you've got a right to habitat protection. They've got to protect your share.
He said that habitat is definitely a part of needing our salmon, and then hatchery fish are also deemed a treaty fish.
Think what would have happened if the court had said no. Hatchery fish aren't included.
Our hatchery fish, they contribute to the next population, the next generation. So they're actually helping with the salmon recovery.
Then it wasn't just finfish, it was also shellfish.
After that came down, the tribes looked for a while and brought the culvert case. So that was a situation where we said you can't put a culvert in the way of fish passage, so fish can't migrate. And we argued was the most important aspect of fish protection was passage. If they couldn't get to the spawning ground and they couldn't get back to the ocean, there was nothing. So having that corridor, that river that was free of impediment, was critical. And the court said yes.
My guess is we'd have very few wild salmon and steelhead returning to Washington now if we hadn't had the benefit of the Bolt decision and the tribe's perspectives about the importance of wild salmon and steelhead.
The Bolt decision, it benefits everyone. It forced the state to become co-managers with the tribes, not only in salmon, but in the habitat arena as well.
To me, it empowers me to do what I need to do to make sure that we're going to have salmon for our future generations.
Hugely important. Without it, I don't think we would be talking about salmon here right now. I honestly don't. I think in many places in this Western Washington, they'd be gone.
Treaty rights can allow the Northwest to continue to grow in a more responsible and balanced way. Kind of like Lower Elwha, who spent better part of 20 plus years removing 2 dams.
When the dams came in, that's when the decline, in my opinion, started, the decline in the salmon populations. It cut them off from their home. They had no home to go to. They're bumping against the dams, wanting to get by, and they wouldn't give up. They'd stay there and die. So we lost a lot of salmon. It literally took an act of Congress, and it took 20 years to get that act. And it was a very long process, a lot of trips to Washington, D.C. When the dams came down, that was a glorious day. Not only dam removal, but my friend, my mentor, Billie Frank, was sitting next to me.
And when you say the Elwha people are strong, you're damn right they're strong.
I have a piece of it at home. It's in my china hutch, and I'm proud of that because it took so long and so much sweat and tears and prayers to get to that point. I had a part in that. My tribe had the biggest part in that. So I'm real proud of that.
My great friend Raz Hepfer, he glows when he talks about that dam being removed. And the fact that they get to have a fishery this year, their culture is restored.
I think the dams came down because of Bolt. It gave us an avenue for co-management. And when you obstruct fish from getting into their pristine habitat, we had to remove it. So if we didn't have the Bolt decision, I don't think that would have happened.
The tribe's advocacy for salmon and for our rivers is a tremendous benefit to all of us in Washington in protecting those natural resources that most of us in Washington came here to enjoy.
Jimmy-Come-Lately Creek is a good example of that. The south end of Sequim Bay was occupied by a commercial log dump. Terrible salmon habitat in that reach. In 1999, the total adult return was just 7 fish. And conditions for shellfish were absolutely terrible. The log yard was decommissioned and was removed from the ground. The creek was put into a brand new renaturalized channel. Today, the average annual return has been in excess of 2,500 spawners. And Sequim Bay is literally the epicenter of the tribe's shellfish operation because Jimmy-Come-Lately Creek had been restored. So that's been a remarkable success story.
I think we ought to be taking full advantage of protecting Indian treaty rights if we're concerned about protecting fish habitat, wildlife habitat, etc. The treaty rights have been a plus for the state of Washington.
We've proven we can bring our salmon back. Now the big issue that we have is our habitat, but we're having to compete against stakeholders.
We had the largest coal port in North America proposed adjacent to our reservation. Going to impact a village site of ours. Going to impact treaty rights that were secured in the 1855 treaty.
Not only was it a coal terminal, it would have been North America's largest coal terminal.
Those ships have to enter and come through fishing areas that will severely impact our treaty fishing rights. Definitely would have had a significant impact on salmon, herring.
That was the driving force for Lummi Nation to oppose and assert its opposition to the Gateway Pacific Terminal. To do so, the nation leveraged its treaty fishing claim.
That we've determined there is a greater than de minimis impact to the Lummi Nation's usual and custom fishing rights based on the Treaty of Point Elliott. I've gone ahead and issued a decision on the permit, which was a denial without prejudice.
When we got that news, it brought tears to many leadership's eyes. It brought tears to many in our community because it was like a 500-pound weight off of our chest. Yes, we got protection.
And the fact that they used this treaty to slay this dragon was phenomenal.
We've been taught early on from our family members and elders to always protect that, and we always will.
The political climate, it peaks and valleys, okay? I think we're in the valley for a while, and then we came up a little bit, but we're in the valley again. I see a tremendous amount of turmoil for the future. We fought so hard for something that we are more than likely to lose, mainly because there is not even a recognition in this country that we are destroying the planet and the environment.
I do think climate change is one of our biggest threats. There's no question about it.
The warming of the waters is one of the things I really notice. These fish still need cold, cool water to survive. With chum salmon returning to the creeks, they have to wait longer in the bay to get into the streams because they're waiting for those fall rains that haven't happened in the last couple of years because of drought conditions.
If you follow what's happening with the resource and the runs, no matter how much work you see people putting in right now, we are really not rebuilding, okay?
You tried managing harvest, tried habitat restoration. We're doing all that work, and it's all good, but we're still losing habitat faster than we restore it. We need to reverse that trend.
So as this resource gets smaller, the competition becomes greater again. So now we're going back, everybody's fighting over less and less and less, right? I don't know how to bring it back unless we take the fight to the environment. On the other hand, how do you fight an environment when your federal government won't recognize it as an issue?
The Bolt decision, how do we effectively use it as a fulcrum point to address climate change? What do we have to do to retain our identity for years to come? And the Bolt decision clearly is a keystone to that.
I believe that future generations should have a birthright to breathe clean air, to harvest fish from a river, eat a clam without fear of dying from the toxins. These fights aren't for money. These fights are all about protection.
Our tribes are, even 50 years later, they're going strong. We still have that spirit. We're still a strong people. We haven't given up on the fight for the salmon.
Our people fought for this. We fought for it, blood, sweat, and tears.
It brought the tribes together, forced us to work together and manage these resources in a common goal.
I just think that we've changed to the better. We're stronger, we're smarter, we're more savvy.
And I think it's taken 50 years for tribes to elevate and realize we are doctors, we are lawyers, we're leaders, we're chairmen, whatever it might be, CEOs. We are more equipped than we've ever been. The fish war isn't over. But instead of fighting over fish, we are fighting for the fish and to keep them here on our planet. I can always remember being on this river. Always made me feel better. You know, and sometimes you forget that in life, but you always come back to the river. It's always our home.
You want to share the screen?
Are we good?
No, yeah.
All right.
So.
Good. So those here in person and online, we are going to spend some time. I want to make sure Willie has some time to speak, share with us, and then also open up for some Q&A. And so we have people monitoring the chat. So if you're online and you want to put it in there, or you can ask verbally too as well. Before we do that though, it's my honor to introduce Willie Frank III from the Nisqually Tribe, former tribal council chairman, and now with the Wahilu Indian School, and to let him talk about that. But just to set some context for Willie and I, so that people learning more about our civil rights movement and this treaty war is about our fishing rights. It's not the first time we've had engagements, right? Because at this time in the 1850s, we had our first war, and that is where our warrior families, which Willie and I descend from, banded together under that Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes. And those leaders, we fought the United States government, we fought government-sponsored militias, right? And so we think of today's context and so how unity is so important. And so I just wanted to put that out there because a lot of people don't know our history. And it's a critical piece. It was that unification, right, in 1857 that secured those treaty rights. And for us, had significant impact. And then the Bolt decision, right? And so for us at home in Muckleshoot, which affirmed us as the ancestral land people of this, where we are today at Seattle Colleges, and that treaty area, and also for those fishermen. So my honor, though, I'm going to turn it over to Willie. And thank you, brother.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I want to raise my hands to Willard there. He's been one of my mentors and teachers. My name is Willie Frank III. My Indian name is Pulaski. I am the son of Billie Frank Jr. My mother was Sue Crystal. My grandfather was Willie Frank Sr. My grandmother was Angeline Tobin Frank. I served 15 years on the Nisqually Tribal Council and realized I was not a politician. You know, being on tribal council, being elected into this position, it was a great honor to serve the people. But one of my focus and goals always growing up was education. And it was the importance of us as Indian children being able to heal, being able to learn about who we really are, not what the government or the schools tell us. And so my family at Frank's Landing, in 1918, 2/3 of the Nisqually Reservation was condemned by Pierce County to make room for what is today Joint Base Lewis McChord. And during that time, my grandfather, he spent about a year kind of just looking for land, and he bought 6 acres of land, what was about 7 miles from the reservation downriver, which is today known as Frank's Landing. And we have the Wahilu Indian School there, kindergarten through 8th grade. We've got about 145 Indian children from 25 different nations. And it's an honor and privilege for me to serve as the director of education. It's beautiful because I'm really focusing on curriculum, content, and I like to talk to our staff down there and just really try to raise them and lift them up, because I think a lot of people, they don't give our educators the respect they deserve. You know, the commitment and the lifelong duties that come with that, responsibilities. You know, Willard talked about the connections we have as a family, and it goes way beyond, you know, way before that treaty even. You know, and I think about it today, what we think about as tribes, you know, growing up, my dad, he'd always talk about Grandpa Willie. My grandpa was born in 1879. Grandma Angeline was born in 1891, and we became a state in 1889. And so if anybody's doing the math, my dad had me when he was 51 years old. And so, you know, growing up with a lot of the old ones, I guess you could say, the older ones who actually, you know, were around the campfires and around the tables when we talked about the true values of who we are as Indian people. And so, you know, having this opportunity to weave together our families, you know, it's what are we teaching our children and how are we teaching it to them? Because growing up, we were all kept apart. I feel like the real family ties were kept separated on purpose. And now we're starting to come back together. And it's not because we are tribal council or we're elected positions, because we are our family and community and kinship. And that was what my dad always talked about, you know. And so growing up, it was always important to slow myself down. And at 43 years old, I was finally able to slow myself down. You know, it took a long time, but being able to start showing our children at Wahilut, as well as our other Indian children in these communities, who they are, you know, where they come from and where they're going, is going to be important. We're kind of in this transitional time, I feel like, right now, not just in the United States, but I think in Indian country also. I'm 43 years old, like I said, and you guys saw my brother on the film. He's 64, Sugar. You know, and he grew up a lot different than I did. He grew up watching our dad get arrested. He grew up watching my dad struggle with alcoholism, you know, and they were poor. You know, I didn't grow up like that. And I'm very fortunate and appreciative, you know, and so I graduated from North Thurston High School in the year 2000. My mother passed away a year after that of cancer. And then my dad decided he wanted to teach me how to fish. And at that time, my brother, he didn't have a lot of patience either. And so my dad forced the three of us together, you know, and it was that bond of fishing on that river together. And so fast forward 20 plus years later, I had the opportunity to experience one of the oldest teachings and traditions just this last November and December, and it was smoking our late Nisqually chum. And my brother, he hadn't done it in over 30 years because the flood of 1996 at Frank's Landing split the community up. And so to reawaken those teachings in our family, there's a lot of healing. There was a lot of crying. There's a lot of laughing, a little bit of anger, you know, and my brother, I just always tease him, you know, because he'd kind of bark at me sometimes and I'd just laugh. I'd say, whatever you need, bro, you know, because that's the respect I have for him, you know, and I wouldn't be the man I am today, you know, if it wasn't for my older brother. You know, he was the one who really slowed himself down to teach me, one, how to be a fisherman, how to set the net, how to prepare the net, how to hang it, but also how to, you know, ice our fish down, you know, how to store our fish, not just going to sell the fish. There's a whole preparation and process for it. So we always want to make sure that the next generation understands that and they have those teachers. And so for me, growing up, Willard was always one of my teachers. We found ourselves a few years ago in the state capitol when they were renaming the STI curriculum after Senator John McCoy, his traditional name. And I started thinking in my head, I'm like, man, it's too much of a coincidence I'm running into this guy everywhere. You know, we'd see each other at different events. You know, and then I started talking to a historian I was working with, Dr. Larson. But also we hooked up with Tallis, Obie's wife, you know, and I saw the documentary years ago when it first came out. But then starting to really think about those family connections, you know, and growing up, Grandpa Willie, or my dad would tell me, Grandpa Willie didn't believe we were a tribe. He believed we were an Indian community because we all come from different places. Like for me, I am Nisqually. I got Yakima, Squaxin, Cowles, probably a little bit of Duwamish, maybe, I don't know, you know, a little bit of everything in me, you know. And so moving forward here, I'm here to answer any questions. And I got a trivia question. I'm going to give away one piece of salmon here. If somebody can get the Willard, you don't get to take part in this one, sir. Sorry, because I have a gift for you all. Sorry. But I want to do a quick trivia kind of question. The winner gets smoked fish. And so all I want is, what year was the Medicine Creek Treaty signed? Hand up, anybody? No wrong answers?
1854.
Yes, you're right, sir. All right. But yeah, you know, it's re-engaging the audience and just trying to be more presentable with folks. You know, I know growing up, we were taught not to ask a lot of questions, but I think now this generation of kids growing up, they want to know who they are. And I was telling Willard on the way before we started today, I said, man, it's really cool to be at Wahilut with all these children. Because when I was growing up, you didn't really want to go to school, let alone be forced to kind of learn about your culture and who you are with the way our family kind of did it. And so to see these kids want to be here, they want to be at school, to see them want to be there on a Saturday and a Sunday is awesome. And so being able to provide support, bringing our communities back together, I believe that's what's going to strengthen Washington State, but also all of our colleges. And so anything I can do to help you, Willard, I'm always here. But I have a gift for you before I answer any questions, and if there are any questions. And so, please come up here, sir. And so usually we give away blankets, right? We always wrap each other with blankets. So I was thinking you're one of my mentors as an older Indian man. And so I want you, older. I want you to have a gift that
Okay.
So I purchased that from my cousin, Kathy Eagle Speaker, over Christmas break. And I wanted to make sure that I give that to you, sir, because I bought it for somebody special. And so amazing. Thank you. Yes. And so, are there any questions?
Yeah, so if there are any questions, I'll allocate this time to, we have some folks on Zoom who are supporting us in that. So if any of you would like to unmute and share any questions that we might have already, or if you have any questions, feel free to unmute or raise your hand.
But also, if folks don't feel like asking the questions, could send them to Willard and I will answer you guys also. So.
Yeah, and feel free to email us if you have a question later that you might want to ask. That hasn't been much of a good idea. South Seattle College.
Is my video going to turn on? Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. This is Kano. I'm the ACO navigator here at South Seattle College. There's a few of us watching from our lounge space over here. Just wanted to thank you also for being here with us and for continuing to tell the story of this work. I had a question around solidarity, really. In the film, the organizers talked about how the fight for the treaty rights to the fish, oh my gosh, I'm spotlighted, required a lot of tribes to band together. And I want to take lessons from that show of solidarity and of bridging the difference and reminding ourselves of who our families are in this current moment where, the federal government is doing all kinds of horrible things, and it feels more crucial than ever for different communities of color to see each other not just as allies, but as co-conspirators, as people who are in the fight together. Are there any lessons or pieces of advice that you might have around building genuine trust and those organizing relationships with folks who have historically been considered very different from yourself?
Are we gonna mute?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think just even showing up to events like this, a lot of stuff, where I'd say Willard, if he's at any event, I'd say show up. Because what we're trying to do right now is unite people, unite our communities, people of color. I always like to remind people, my grandma, grandpa, and my father, they could have been three of the most bitter human beings in the world. And they weren't. And it's interesting because the time we live in right now, I think for us just showing up is important. I think people are the biggest thing I think is living in fear right now is easy. But yeah, I would just say, one, learn about all of the different races and ethnicities out there. That's the biggest thing I'm trying to teach our children about is that it's not just Native Americans out there. It's all races, all people of color. And it's trying to unite all the just good people, good hearts, good minds, and good souls. Hope that answered it the best I could.
Okay, do we have any other folks that might want to ask a question or any other questions that might be in the feed?
A quick question. Thank you for being here, and thank you to both the organizers for letting us stop.
once the Bolt decision was passed, my mind kept thinking about the co-management. And I was thinking about it in today's terms too with climate change. I know the documentary kind of touched on that towards the end as well. But I'm kind of curious to know if you can speak more of what that co-management relationship looks like, and what that relationship looks like today in battling climate change, especially against like the federal government and corporations.
Well, I think the co-management is a success, I think, from where we came. Every year our tribes in the state sit down every year at the North of Falcon, and they discuss our salmon forecast for the year. And I've sat at those tables many years, 10 years I sat at those, and they can be challenging. But we always come to the agreement and a solution rather than ending up in the courtroom. But I think what co-management is expanding now into education, healthcare, housing, law enforcement. I think it's expanding so much because if you look at the original language of the treaties, and each treaty is different, but I think when you're looking at the language, there's a part in there for education, trade, commerce, and a lot of other, things that involve the state, involve the federal, cities and counties also. So I hope as we move forward, we start focusing on the language in those treaties, but I think also water is going to be an important issue. Assuring that everybody's not listening to what they see on social media. I think listening to our traditional teachers, the values and the stories that they have. I hope we're coming out of the years of the used car salesman, where people talk fast but don't have a lot of, support behind it, I guess, or teeth behind it. Willard and I probably sold fireworks for a lot of years, and we've experienced those people a lot, and so, I hope that we're coming into a time where people are going to be more sincere, and they're going to want to come to the table. I think the younger generation, not just of Indian children, of all races, they want to learn from people. I think they're looking for leaders right now, but it's like, who can they trust? I had some of our, young tribal members, one of my nephews, Taylor Christ, Squaxin Island tribal member. It was about 3 years ago. He hooked up for lunch and he said, Willie, it's just such a weird time. He goes, who do we trust out there? As my generation. And I thought about that. I'm like, man, he goes, because everything I was taught was about your father and how brilliant and amazing he was. And so I said, well, Taylor, I think just keep being patient. Time will come. And now he's the vice chairman of his tribe, and he's an amazing artist. But I think it is a unique time right now, just to show up. I think, Willard, you guys were telling me like, oh, there's going to be more people here. And I'm like, I don't care who's here. I'm like, you guys are here. Like, we're all here together. Like whoever's on Zoom's here. We could have all been any place else, but we're all here today. Yeah.
I have. We have someone here with a question at Central, so kind of take care. I just want to raise my hand up to you.
We've got a comment here on Zoom.
Jared, we have somebody over here at Central.
Oh, sorry.
I just saw the things that were historically shared. It just makes me cry because I know what it feels like to survive the trauma and how the government has implemented all these things and how society and just to fight for our rights, just to be here and to be with our children. And I'm originally from Montana, but we had an elder that Ray Williams got by, and I know he had 2 names, and really opened my eyes, even though being in an urban setting. And because of him really teaching, and that was my prayer, because it's something I heard somewhere that was supposed to be spiritual. And it was about Chief South, so that's how my prayers got answered about teachings. And so it's really a blessing just to witness and I did not know the history of this territory. And I think it really is needed to bring more spaces, which you're doing here, to educate and create more awareness, because the government and school system is not going to do it. So I applaud you and the tribal schools and what you're doing. And who does that? Who wants to go to school on Saturday?
I know.
I suffered a great deal, even post-secondary education, because I would get humiliated for asking questions, and just because of my skin color. So I'm really grateful. I had a nephew that went up to Lummi to the tribal school. He was homeless here in Seattle, and it's a miracle that he got accepted at Seattle University and graduate, because he went to Lummi Tribal School and completed. And it was, I believe it's because of the work that everyone does together, to work together to lift others up. And I'm just grateful because he still fights and wants to complete and get more education. So I wish I had teachers, and I think there's a lack of teaching. And so that's how I came in and to learn from Ray and his work. We have survived so much and overcome so much, and my children, that generation, is alcohol drug free, and that truly is a miracle. And not many people, you know, can say that, but that's been a part of that big process, right? So I just want to hope and pray that there'll be more things like this in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. and his civil rights movement. And just, I'm 54, and I'm just learning all these things. So they are quite eye-opening, and just watching Ray with teachings from Swinomish, oh my goodness. He planted seeds in me and really taught me to have a voice. So it's just been a combination of different, collaboration in the community. And so, yeah, thank you so much. My son left, and I wish he would have stayed, because he's my oldest. And to really hear all that work is truly, it's inspiring, and at all levels. Oh my goodness. So, yeah, I hope we can share the video, share the movie and documentary more. I know in Montana, it's the law, they're supposed to share historical, indigenous, Native American history. So I don't know what the laws here are in Washington.
We're pushing them in a good way.
Yeah, man, this is so powerful. To overcome all that is truly inspiring. Not give up, no matter what, and all these barriers, and to bring change and bring unity as never before, because it's needed in these times. But thank you so much.
Thank you. And well, if I can just step in, and Willie and I have worked on this over the years, so we modeled after what Montana did in Washington State. And so that curriculum he's talking about, the John McCoy, Leah Lushton's time memorial, it is state law in Washington State, but it's K-12. And so one of the things, my boss, Yonder, thank you for coming, sir, is passed and pushed on me is like, we've done it K-12, we need this in higher ed. So we are literally looking at how do we do that now. And so we have it in for pre-service teachers, but it's a 1 credit class. And so it is on our long-term goal sheet. So yeah, just so we just want to make sure you know we're listening. Thank you again.
Also, I want to take the time to just thank you, Juanita, because if it's okay, I just want to acknowledge you for the amount of work that you've already been doing here in Seattle, because not only is Juanita a student, but also has been a leader here in the Seattle community for our most vulnerable communities, for our most underrepresented, not even just the Native community, but a lot of our communities. And I'm just very grateful that you're here bearing witness to this. And I know you're going to take that with you in the classroom in the front lines of all your work. So thank you very much that you're here and shared that. Oh, and Jared, did you say that you have somebody who wanted to share a question?
Yes, I apologize for interrupting earlier. I did not hear. Felice in the chat said there are many important messages and lessons I learned from this film, and I really appreciate that. I agree with the film's last message that protecting our environment is more important than ever. And it sounds like Felice is doing a lot of good volunteer work with the local salmon population too.
Any more questions?
First, thank you so much for coming and sharing just your history and honoring your father's legacy and what he's done here. My name is Kiana, and I'm the navigator for Sisterhood Scholars here. My family, I grew up in Tacoma. My family is from a U.S. territory, from American Samoa. And so fishing is a part of our livelihood there. But I was listening to you say how like your dad brought you and your brother together to start coming down the river and how you were learning how to smoke fish. And it reminded me of just what I realized I lost after my dad passed away. Because he was an avid fisherman. So anytime we went to Samoa, he'd throw out nets and he would bring all of these fish in from his village, and then we'd travel to my mom's island. Then he would distribute it to my grandpa. My grandpa would give it out to everybody else in the village because they don't have access to that type of fish. So it made me think a lot about the legacy my dad had and what I lost because I wasn't raised on the land. I was raised in the diaspora. I tried to cut up a tuna a few years ago. It was so sad. I was like, he's barely on me right. But I think it reminded me of how important it is to maintain kind of those histories that our elders, our parents have passed down to us. And so I was just really interested in hearing about what is it that you're sustaining, like the lessons that you learned from your dad, or even just being in the schools and what the youth are learning. What are some of those lessons that you're trying to embed with them and keep with them so they don't look like me trying to cut up tuna?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a terrible filleter. I cannot fillet salmon at all. So we all, growing up, you always have different roles. Some people have to watch the fire, some people, have to do different things. But one of the things, that my dad taught me was always be yourself, but for him, it was always, you don't worry about what other people think or say about you. And so growing up, I'd watch him go talk to the governor, the president, senators, congressmen, and then be in a second grade classroom the next day telling them the same story. Change a few words, of course, but it was always just showing up. If you get invited somewhere, you show up. It's almost like you go back to those old values that Grandma Angeline and Grandpa Willie, were the bosses, really. They set the tone, and so I think about the teachings growing up. My dad would always say, your mother's always the boss, right? The women are the bosses. But it wasn't like the mean girls and the women are in charge and control and dominant. No, it was about, the values that our Indian women set in the community. And I growing up, I remember my grandma. She died when I was 5 years old. I can remember spending time with her. But I always got a lot of stories as I got older from other people. And they said, Grandma Angeline, she was one of the most respected elder women in the, out of Indian country in the communities. But she was still somebody who respected the fishermen more than anything. The fishermen would go fishing, they'd go catch a fish, and Grandma Angeline would walk down there with a $100 bill and buy a fish off the fisherman. And they wouldn't give her the fish, they didn't want to take her money, but she would, pay them because that was the value she looked at. It was about supporting our fishermen who were going out there, and exercising that right we fought so hard for. And then going back and having the opportunity now to hear my grandfather's recordings, because he was our last language keeper at Nisqually. And it's funny because as Indian men, sometimes we get a little bit lazy, sometimes, sometimes. But in the tapes, Grandpa, he doesn't say the word right. And you can hear Grandma Angeline, boy, her must have been sitting in the room with him, and her voice speaks up. And she tells him 5 times to say it right, and it was cute to see. And so I think, the lessons and the values that, my parents, not just my dad, my mother, she worked for 2 of our governors in Washington State. She was a Jewish woman from Detroit, and so for me, I always realized too, I couldn't be anything more than a half-breed, right? My dad was a full-blooded Indian, my mother was a Jewish woman from Detroit, and so growing up, I think that was always something they were trying to strengthen in me was, don't let names bother you. Even your own family's gonna try to tear you down at times. But they're also lifting you up too and strengthening you. And so I think for our children, growing up, it's to have patience, to have discipline, but also to have a lot of love and forgiveness in your heart. And I think about my dad. My brother, 64, and Indian men, we don't communicate very well. And if you're not taught at a young age, I had my father, a great teacher, who allowed me to talk about my feelings and my emotions. And so growing up, my brother, he didn't really, wasn't really taught that. And so we're able to start communicating more now. And so I asked him one day, he doesn't do a lot of these. I tried to even get him up here today with me, right? But he doesn't like doing a lot of these. And so I got him to do a screening at South Puget Sound Community College. And it was my wife and I and my brother, and I got out of the car and I got up enough courage because sometimes my brother would just cuss me out for asking a dumb question. And so I said, hey, bro, I said, I never asked you this before. I said, was our dad ever bitter or angry? And I said, not before the bolt, or not after the bolt decision. I'm talking about what you remember, growing up. And he said he was never bitter or angry. And I'm like, okay, I just want to confirm that because everybody has to get over their own, nonsense now because it's time to unite and come together. And so being able to talk to him a little bit more and helping him heal was always something I think my dad wanted me to do also. So, any other questions?
Yes, we've got a question from Beth Anderson on the Zoom. Beth Anderson asks, are there any other books or media that you'd recommend on this, especially for junior high and high school age students?
Yeah, definitely. Messages from Frank's Landing is a great book. Let's see, the new Treaty Justice book is out. Charles Wilkinson wrote both of those books. Let's see, there's YouTube has a lot of good short films. There's one on there called Billy's Magic that's really good. And then the Children of the Setting Sun did a 3-part series on the Billie Frank Jr. statue also. Yeah. And so there's a lot of good information out there though.
We've got, in addition to this question from Chelsea Hoffman, who asks, what about for kinder age students?
Let's see. Well, we got the Billie Frank Jr. cartoon. Salmon Defense did that years ago. You can find that on Salmon Defense webpage, or you could find it on YouTube. Northwest Indian Fish Commission Treaty Tribes, they got some short cartoons. But also, there's also a short series. It was a 24-part series called Crash Course. And it's on YouTube. If you guys have not seen it, it's an educational tool. I don't remember the native gentleman who does it. He's hilarious. He's awesome. They did one on the Bolt decision though, and Billie Frank Jr. And so I definitely strongly recommend Crash Course. You got to go in there and look for the Native American videos. But yeah, it's another good one.
Thank you so much.
Oh, we have a question here at Central.
My education was in my country, so my English is not good. But I thanks many thanks of you because I learned so much in the USA, and I'm happy that I'm here. When I participated in Martin Day celebration, I understand that his soul wants something from me. And I learned that I can use my voice with your correlation with me to tell my situation of my country, Iran, you know. I want to thank you that I am here and I'm all the student here. I'm learning so much. In very, every moment, I think. I'm very happy that I should have your speaking. And I want to tell you that grow up is important, but grown up is more and more important. Grown up is something that it is culture of yours. I love the culture of Seattle and your family.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have a question. Okay, I'll ask now. We were talking earlier about advocacy and solidarity among different tribes, as well as different tribal groups such as American Indians and Alaska Natives. What are some ways that that there have been like efforts of protecting salmon and water rights, and what are some ways that maybe you want to work on or want to expand on within the relationship between Alaska Natives and Northwest American Indians?
Yeah, that's a good question. So growing up, my dad would travel to Alaska a lot. And so as I got older, I'd start, getting to know the folks that he was working with. And one of his goals was to try to get some kind of united group up in Alaska with the Alaska Natives up there to, like the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, where they can all come to the table and they can all, hopefully have solutions and strategies for the salmon population. But I think unity at this time is so important amongst all of our tribes, 29 here in the state, as well as our Alaska Natives, as well as our federally recognized, tribes. I think as Indian people, we always forget that we are the first people of this area. We know what we need to do to protect the environment, and so I think just unity is important, but I think if you can find the right group of elders, but also the right group of, it's weird, you almost have to find the right amount of people from all ages right now who are willing to come to the table and listen. I mean, you look at the group we got in here, just the people watching the film. I think about even down at Walkie Loop now, being the director of education, we got, people in their late 60s, early 70s, early 80s even. And then we got teachers in their 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way up. And it's funny because they all come in and they all have a style or a teaching. And I always laugh because they all think one way is the right way. Well, as Native people, not just one way to find the answer or the solution. There's so many different, areas of partnership, collaboration, communication. I don't know. I was always taught the best way to bring people together is food. So, yeah.
Do we have any other questions possibly on Zoom or on any of the campuses?
None yet on Zoom.
Do we have any here in the audience? Oh, Juanita.
I just want to share real quick. You know how the Kirky Creek, the fish that comes, the salmon that comes up through there?
Mm.
Well, it was my daughter that had told me about it, and I did not even have a clue. And I was supposed to take an environmental class, sustainability, but I'm just grateful in how critical in a time the need for healing. And Ray used to take us up to the water Chase the Alpha, and we also went to the Fleet of Blessing.
Oh, yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And some of the other.
That's one of the best
Oh, yeah.
experiences you'll ever have. Like, yeah.
And it was, and even went out to the water to bathe and pray, and that's something that I received. So my point is, during the pandemic, instead of the mental health or counseling for trauma, we suffered a lot of trauma. And because of the teachings and me listening and then going to these places and witnessing and really watching and learning, and that's what started that fire of reclaiming my identity and to not forget my ancestors. And it really is healing, because with trauma, people, if they don't know what they're doing, it feels like broken glass, and it's more hurtful and damaging. So I just want to say the connection to the land, water, the trees, and all the things that the statements were made, replanting the trees, I get so much comfort just hearing a hummingbird, the birds, and with my daughter in her healing process with disabilities, with mental health, just being able to make that connection. And I'm so grateful for that, and that's something they don't really teach in school. So it's almost like it's just enlightening and converting more about Indigenous teaching and how powerful that still is today. So thank you.
One of the things we're doing at the school, I gotta hype Walkie Lead up now, because we took our, 5th and 7th graders out this year to plant trees along the Nisqually River. And then, so teaching them those traditional kind of teachings, but getting them outside like you're saying. One of the things in my life that really saved it was during COVID, was getting outside again. Getting back outside with my wife, going for walks like we did when we first got together 20 years ago. And re-engaging with the wildlife out there. That's one of my saviors too. So I appreciate that stuff. Yeah.
And it's free, powerful,
yes.
And I can't use no words.
It doesn't cost anything, right?
Jared?
Circling back to a question that was asked earlier, there was a question regarding what is the best place to watch this film if we want to watch it on our own or share it with loved ones.
I think it's on Amazon. I think a bunch of the streaming networks have it now, I think. Maybe you guys could put a link in.
Yeah, we'll do that. And also, it lives at Northwest Indian Fish Commission. And so if there's any educators on here, they can submit a request. They're very responsive and in doing that. But this whole session is also going to live on SCTV for a while, so we can access it there.
And I think if you do reach out to the commission, they will also, if you want to do a viewing, they would send people also for your school.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, what is the blessing of the fleet? Don't mind checking.
So Blessing of the Fleet happens every year at Swinomish. I had the honor to attend it many times as an adult and a few times as a kid, where it's first salmon ceremony and they bless all of the the fishermen and their fleets before they go out for the season. Pretty amazing experience, yeah.
And it's open to the community.
Yeah, it's open to the community.
I recommend anybody to go.
And it's usually May, right? Right around April, May, I think it is usually. Yeah, right around spring Chinook season. So.
Yeah, it's just to raise the community and Swinomish. Oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
I can't even know.
Tracy out of the race to take us up, and we would go to the sobriety, and then they had posted campouts.
That's cool.
There on the weekend, and yeah, it's just so rowdy.
Yep.
And I believe it's sacred, because I can't even say, with all the weaponization that the government has done against me, don't be you,
yep.
Be like us. literally tears those lies down and truth. And the beauty of it, oh my, and songs is just so, this community is so powerful. And when they have gatherings, I try not to miss. But yeah, I really honor the Ray sharing at the Chief Seattle Club, because he really taught me so much. I mean, I'm just so grateful for him and his family. And the generosity of the tribes is so powerful. And my brother's end of life journey, they helped me take him back home to our homeland, where other people couldn't understand why would you want to do that? But it helped him to prepare for what's coming, and also it was a powerful, life-changing connection for him that was needed, and to be with our people and our homelands and our community. So Ray, just watching him and the work he did in the song, they really are the first song. Yeah, it's powerful. That's all I do. And it's healing. It brings healing and beauty to my heart and inspiration, and makes me want to be the best person I can.
Next year, Nisqually Indian Tribe is hosting the canoe journey. 2026 paddles in Nisqually. We invite everybody to come down.
I have a comment for that.
Yeah, you're good.
We've been up to LaConner and Swimish with a bunch of students came in, but when they did the Piala one for the youth, our floor caught on fire. So we were in a hotel, and guess where we went? We had nowhere to go. We went, and it was a safe place for us to be. So I'm always grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you.
We have also a raised hand from South Seattle College. B.
Thanks for calling on me, Patricia. I appreciate you. I wanted to ask about calls to action. Earlier in the chat, Felice, who had asked about screening the film, shared that Felice also volunteers with feeding the salmon fry at Carkeek Park. And she mentioned something about how the salmon eggs are provided by Muckleshoot. Following that, I really admire Felice for engaging in that work. I also wanted to ask, besides reading these materials and watching the videos, are there ways for community members, or other ways, I think this could be a collective brainstorm, to engage with fishing sovereignty rights, to continue learning about this, and especially in the sense of participating? I understand that it's really important as we learn about tribal sovereignty to also genuinely for ourselves develop our own relationships with the land, with the water. Yeah, besides the required reading, I'm just building a list in my head, volunteering to feed the salmon fry, attending the first
the Billie Frank Jr. Nisqually Wildlife Refuge. Did you get that?
Oh, yeah. Did you get that?
The Billie Frank Jr. Nisqually Wildlife Refuge.
One more time. The Billie Frank Jr. Nisqually, what was the rest of that?
Wildlife Refuge.
Wildlife Refuge. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any other place you'd recommend, though, just so she can get out and see?
Kind of things. I mean, we always go to Daybreak Star in Seattle for the Seattle Lights. And so it's one of the few places where you can find older forest, not necessarily old growth, but older forest, and visit the Daybreak Star Cultural Center and learn some of that history, that civil rights. And it's one of those true places where we got land back and then has that generational effects. And for us urban Indians that live in Seattle, yeah.
Another good place is Dash Point. You ever get a chance, go check out Dash Point. Okay.
Do you have anything else? I'm here on the feed.
I gotta get a picture with Willard though.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, and we have a program too. So I want to thank everybody, especially Willie, for being here. This was really a special treat and an honor to get to have him come. And we love our staff at Northwest Indian Fish Commission, but I wanted to ask Willie, just for the importance of this week and, under DeAndre's leadership about social justice. And it is because of that we're here today and that we put this history here in Seattle colleges and to do this work. So, and it really is so critical. And it's a rare occasion that, and in my 56 years that you have a boss that's just kind of lights the fire and says, go for it. And now he may regret some of those days with me here, but no, it is the amount of work. So, but thanks everybody. Thank you to SCTV, right, for hooking all this up. It is no small venture. They've been working on this for days for us, for our IT team, for everybody, Seattle Colleges, all our peeps that are online here, because we don't do any of this alone. But we got Willie a swag bag with a bunch of goodies in there, a social justice t-shirt and so forth. And then I'm just going to share this honor song for him. So you talked about canoe journey for a lot of us that saved our lives, right? And so I'm so excited to go back to Willie's homeland. One of my first years skippering, I crashed a canoe on the river on the way into Frank's Landing. Yeah. And so it was I didn't tip over. I did go into the river bank. So then I always give props to those fishermen, and it really tears through there. So it's something going by Manparks. But yeah. So, but it's good memories, and we're bringing that to Seattle colleges too. So we're excited about that. So I just encourage you all to take a moment and share. Yeah, this song comes from Canoe Journey, and it comes from the Sacred Water Canoe family. It's called Eagle Spirit.
Oh, yeah. Picture back.
Thank you, everyone.